Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out on this very frosty January night. And first off, before I forget, I want to thank the media committee for coming out and filming a number of these long meetings. We really appreciate your good work. It's important to us that everyone in the district who is part of it, even though they can't come out, that they stay informed. So I'm Aileen Rohr, the town supervisor. I have Ken Schneider here, the Ward 4 representative, and it's been a long process before we've arrived here. We are here to discuss the engineering report on the Greenfields water and sewer districts, and we have a number of professionals here to give us an update on their study and where we're going next. First, I'd like to introduce Darlene Buttrick. She is an engineer with Team B Engineering. She was the project consulting engineer. We also have Aaron Moore, also with Team B Engineering and the project engineering consultant for sewer. We have Paul Malmrose. He's with Team B Engineering as well, and another project consulting engineer. We also have Bridget Barkley, who is the president of the Water Authority, the chairperson. Executive director, I'm sorry, of the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, and Jonathan Churins, also of the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. Excuse me, I'm kind of having a little bit of a cold here, so it's, please excuse me if I have to stop and abruptly cough. But again, I would like to express my thank you to all the team who spent many hours examining the system, as well as the Water Authority, who have been immensely helpful to the town. We also have Mark Rao and Pete of VRI and Pete Sotero of our town engineer, who have also worked very hard to bring our water districts into the best compliance that we can. So with the assistance of the Water Authority, the town obtained grants totaling $175,500 from the New York State Department of Local Government a Citizens Reorganization Empowerment Grant Program. Excuse me. The grants provided for an independent engineering study of each of the town-owned water and sewer systems to determine how best to physically manage the equipment and infrastructure to ensure safe and reliable service. The town formed a reorganization study committee, and we do have Lynn Carolla and Charles Cullen of that committee here with us tonight, and that included representatives from the town board, the advisory committee, and the Water Authority staff, and charged the RSC with the task of developing this reorganization study. The goal of the project is to determine whether meaningful benefits can be realized by dissolving the existing town Greenfields water and sewer districts and transferring ownership and management responsibilities for the water systems to the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. There are numerous benefits, and they are considered to include improved efficiency and quality of service delivery, professional management of long-term maintenance and rehabilitation of infrastructure, and improved efficiencies through scale and organizational structure, maintaining continuity despite biennial elections in system oversight and the management of capital projects lasting 3 to 5 years. So I think most people in town know that the town board is elected every 2 years, and so there can be very abrupt changes in leadership, and one of the advantages of the Water Authority is that they don't have that. It's not a political system. They are an authority that is part of Dutchess County government, and so they have that historical knowledge and that continuity that the town has really not been able to provide. I think I'm a little bit of an anomaly in the fact that I was happy to run a second time, as was your representative, Ken Schneider, and we're looking forward to a third term, but that's kind of unusual, and so one of the advantages that we saw is that the Water Authority can provide that historical knowledge that we were definitely missing when we first came into office. The final option that the final benefit that we have perceived in making this transfer is that we believe townwide savings as local government officials are relieved of the increasing complexities of operating and managing small water systems, and thereby able to commit greater time and attention to core municipal functions. So probably most of you know that these water and sewer plants are very, require an intensive focus on their maintenance and especially their capital improvements. And so because we're a town, we're really not designed for that type of dedication of services. So that's another advantage we see in the transferring of these systems to the Water Authority. So during the year of 2014, the town of Hyde Park completed this independent engineering evaluation of the neighborhood water and wastewater systems managed by the town. There we own 9, we manage 8. We focused on system condition as well as opportunities to streamline and improve service delivery. Specifically, the grant-funded engineering evaluations has provided the town with an independent assessment of the Greenfields water and sewer systems. The results of the evaluation explore the current condition and the need for significant improvements. The town is in agreement with the findings of the report. So, based on the engineering evaluation's findings, the town and Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority have developed a system management plan and proposed to transition ownership and operation of the systems from the town to the Water Authority. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Bridget Barkley, the Executive Director of the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, and she can tell you a little bit about the operations and management of the Water Authority. Okay, thanks. Good advice. So, Bridget Barkley.
Thank you. So I'm just going to give a quick overview about who the Water and Wastewater Authority is, what we do, and then turn it over to Erin is going to talk first on the water, or okay. So quickly, Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority is a public benefit corporation. We're not a department of Dutchess County, but we were created by Dutchess County through an action of state legislation to address water and wastewater issues throughout the county. We were created in 1992. We're governed by a 5-member volunteer board of directors. They are appointed by the county executive and the county legislature, and they are legally responsible for the overall activities and actions of the Water and Wastewater Authority, just as a town board is responsible for that municipality. Again, we were created in 1992. We started operating water and wastewater systems in 1995. We now own and operate 11 water systems, 3 wastewater systems, and 1 water transmission system. We're spread out through about 10 different municipalities in the county. We serve just over 4,100 customer connections, be it single-family houses up to businesses, industries, and institutional properties, again, throughout the county. Over the time that we've been owning and operating systems, we've completed about $45 million of capital upgrades to those systems. With one exception, every system that the authority owns and operates was a previously existing system. In every case, the owners, whether it was a homeowners association, a civic association, a private water or sewer company, or a municipality, came to the authority and asked us to look at taking over the systems because of problems that they were having. Sometimes financial problems, but in almost every instance, issues dealing with the condition of the infrastructure, ability of plants to meet permit, water systems that had water quantity or water quality problems. So we have a tremendous amount of experience coming in, looking at these systems, evaluating the upgrades that are needed, and then implementing those under the authority's governance and watch. again, as I said, we've done about $45 million in upgrades in systems since 1995. We have about a $5 million a year operating budget across all of our systems. Each of the systems we own and operate is operated independently from a financial perspective. The customers that are served by a particular system pay the costs, both operational and capital improvement costs for their systems. We don't commingle funds between our different systems. We have a staff of 20 people. It includes management staff. We have a licensed engineer on staff. We have water and wastewater system operators who hold the highest levels of licenses to operate water and sewer systems that New York State grants. For the systems that we own, we use a combination of our own staff and contract operators to run those systems. Right now, VRI, Mark Rao is here from VRI, operates the systems for the town of Hyde Park. VRI operates at this point, actually all of our systems now as of this year. So we have a great amount of working experience working with VRI. We use primarily our staff to operate our Hyde Park regional water system, which provides water for most of the Route 9 corridor in Hyde Park and a good part of the Route 9G corridor. We work very hard to keep costs appropriate for our customers, trying to balance between the need for affordability and the need to properly maintain the systems over the long term, because we are in it for the long term. I've been with the authority for 20 years. Again, we've been operating systems for since 1995. And we know that the best and most responsible approach to operating the systems is to maintain them appropriately, to make the upgrades and improvements as they're needed. We are very accountable to our customers. We work very hard to communicate. We are subject to open meetings law and freedom of information laws, as any public entity is. But we try to go beyond that in terms of providing information to customers on the condition of their system, budget adoption, rate adoption, any improvements to the systems that are needed. We do that through mailings that go out with the quarterly bills to our customers. We do it through a website we maintain, www.dcwwa.org. There's a lot of W's. And I encourage you to go look at that. You can see what kind of information that our customers can see about our systems. So we have very much appreciated the opportunity to work with the town of Hyde Park. I think that there have already been benefits that have come out of this process in terms of everybody having a better understanding of what the condition of these facilities are. Improvements have already been made to some of the systems as a result of the study. And if the town decides to go forward and transfer the systems to the authority, and we'll talk later about how that happens, we look forward to the opportunity to be the service provider for the water and wastewater system for Greenfields. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to talk about the water system.
Okay. Thank you, Bridget. Darlene Buttrick with Ty & Bond, and I was the project manager for the water facilities portion of the evaluation for the Greenfields district. So let's see here. So before I go into the findings of our evaluation, I just want to go over real quick the water and wastewater systems and how they're set up. The water system includes the source water wells, a water treatment building, and a system of water mains that bring the water to each of the homes within the system. And let's see if I use that button. Yeah. And your water treatment building itself is located right off of Cream Street here. And for the wastewater collection system, it includes a series of pipes that bring your raw sewage to the wastewater treatment plant where it's treated and then discharged. And let's see, and this is the location right along Windmill Road where the wastewater treatment plant is located. So what we did for the water and wastewater system evaluations was we needed to first develop an understanding of the existing systems and what they include, identify what the needed facility improvements are for the systems, categorize the priority of those improvements, and then come up and develop a cost for those recommended improvements. On the water system side, we evaluated the system capacity, fire flow and pressures, the water quality, the condition of the facilities themselves, and potential interconnection opportunities with neighboring water systems. And on the wastewater system side, we looked at the wastewater treatment capacity, inflow and infiltration, effluent quality, and the condition of the facilities. The facility site visits were conducted on March 11th of 2014, and what we looked at was the civil and site infrastructure, safety, ways that safety could either be improved or upgraded, process mechanical equipment and its condition, the buildings and structures that are included in each of the systems, as well as their heating, ventilation, electrical, and fire support systems, and instrumentation. And then we took our recommendations and we categorized them into one of three categories. Urgent being those items that we feel were either in imminent danger of failure, had a safety-related issue associated with them, or another sort of electrical code, sanitary, or regulatory compliance issue. Short-term items are items we recommend implementing or addressing in the next 5 years, and long-term items are items that we recommend addressing within the next 15 years. And for each of those recommendations, we came up with a budgetary cost for the item that included the equipment cost itself, the cost to demolish or remove the existing piece of equipment, the cost to install the new piece of equipment, and any temporary facilities that might be required to replace that piece of equipment during its removal and replacement. We also included standard markups that included contractor markups, assuming that an outside contractor would be hired to perform the work, engineering fees for any design that would be necessary, owner, administration, legal, land, or easement acquisition if applicable, and project contingency. And the one thing I do want to note is that each of the items, each of the recommendations were budgeted individually, but there could be savings realized if they were grouped together as a total project. So now I'm going to go into the water district evaluation a little bit. The source for the Greenfield system is groundwater. There are 4 wells, 4 currently active wells that range in capacity between 34 and 53 gallons per minute, with the largest well being 53 gallons per minute. There are also 3 15,000-gallon atmospheric tanks, transfer pumps that then boost the pressure of the water into 2 15,000-gallon hydrostatic tanks. The system supplies currently 281 residential connections with an average day demand of 42,700 gallons per day, or about 30 gallons per minute. And that is also equivalent to about 150 gallons per connection per day, which is pretty typical for a water system. And a maximum day demand of 70,200 gallons per day, or about 49 gallons per minute. In terms of what that means, in terms of adequacy of the supply, the firm capacity of the supply, meaning the capacity with your largest well out of service, is 119 gallons per minute. However, that number can be a little deceiving. According to some of the reports that we reviewed, there were issues in the summertime during drought periods where the wells were not able to keep up with the production that was needed in the system, and there were a couple instances where water had to be trucked into the district. Also, we've seen that over time the wells historically have decreased in production over time, and that's also one of the reasons why on that previous slide you saw the wells were numbered 9 through 12. There were 8 previous wells that have since been abandoned, either due to a decrease in supply or the water quality deteriorating over time. In terms of future demands, there is potential for the expansion of the Greenfield system into the northeastern corner of the area called Greenfields East. There's potential additional 119 parcels in the area, and by adding those parcels, it would increase the average day demands to about 57 gallons per minute, and the future maximum day demands to about 94 gallons per minute. The other thing to note is that fire protection would be necessary for those new units. And we believe that based on the information we've reviewed, that it would be a strain to the wells, and also could the additional withdrawals could potentially exacerbate existing water quality issues, which I'll go into in a second. And so the recommendation would be that it might possibly need an additional well, tank, and/or treatment to expand into that area. The distribution system itself includes over 15,000 feet of 6-inch asbestos cement pipe and 4,300 feet of 8-inch asbestos cement pipe and 18 hydrants. The storage that's provided by those atmospheric storage tanks is provides a little less than a day of storage at a maximum day and a little over a day of storage at an average day. The pressures provided by the hydropneumatic tanks provide between 42 and 98 psi, depending on where you are in the system. In terms of fire flow, it is insufficient and is limited by the pumps that pump into those tanks and the capacity of the wells themselves. There is potential to better that by providing a larger size atmospheric storage tank, which has been looked at in the past, however has been determined to be cost prohibitive at that time. And additional larger pumps would be required as well. So a little bit about the water quality of the system. Overall, for the majority of parameters, it's good quality water and it meets most of the parameters. There were a few issues with sodium, radium, and coliform in the past. Those have been addressed. But there are recurring issues with iron and manganese, and there have been Department of Health violations in 2001, 2004, 2006, 7, 12, and 13. And this is just a table showing water quality results for iron and manganese in 2013. And as you can see, manganese exceeded the regulatory limit of 0.3 milligrams per liter in all but one sample, and total iron and manganese also exceeded the regulatory limit of 0.5 milligrams per liter for total combined iron and manganese in all but one of the samples. The other thing I want to point out is that we also did look at data from 2001 through 2013, and there is a trend of increasing levels over time. And also there's a lot of information on the total combined water, which is what is required to be sampled for, but not a lot of information on the individual wells. And so right now, the current treatment includes sequestering with phosphate. Essentially what that means is that it keeps the iron and manganese in the water, doesn't allow it to precipitate out, thus staining your fixtures and discoloring the water. However, it doesn't remove the iron and manganese from the water. So what we recommend is conducting additional sampling for the individual wells to get a better understanding of the individual water quality for each of the wells, and possibly focusing on using some of the better quality wells more than others. Possibly piloting treatment alternatives to address the water quality issues, and possible construction of an iron and manganese treatment system, depending on how that water quality continues in the future. So we also looked, in addition to the desktop analysis that we did, we also looked at the physical condition of the assets included in the system, including the 4 wells, the treatment building, the chlorine and phosphate treatment systems, the 3 atmospheric storage tanks, the 2 booster pumps, and the 2 hydropneumatic tanks. Overall, the system is in good condition, but there are upgrades that are needed to address aging infrastructure that's typical for any water system. And again, really the bigger concern is addressing the water quality and source capacity issues. So I'm just going to go over a summary now of all the various recommendations. Operational recommendations, as I discussed. One thing we recommend is flow testing each well. Right now it's not real clear what the actual real capacity of each well is, so gaining a true understanding of what each capacity of what each well can do. Sampling the individual wells for iron and manganese, evaluating that approach, possible treatment approaches, and considering biological or chemical type filtration are 2 of the options to look at. In terms of the costs associated with this, approximately $86,000 for the studies, and upwards of $1.5 million if additional treatment was added. In terms of urgent improvements, we recommended a few chemical feed system safety improvements, including containment for the chemical tanks and labels, and I believe these have been addressed since our evaluation. Additional security improvements, including locks on the wells and the storage tank manholes, screening of the tank vents, and a fire extinguisher at the treatment building for a total cost of $23,700. Short-term recommendations for the wells include addressing a few easement issues that are outstanding, regrading around wells 9, 10, 11 to ensure that groundwater does not pond around the wells, and instrumentation for the wells, which would monitor the level of the wells over time so you could get a better anticipation of when you're drawing down that well to during a drought condition. In terms of short-term improvements for the treatment building itself, there are a few structural repair recommendations, including roof replacement and some masonry repairs, replacement of the booster pumps that are used to maintain pressure in the system along with the hydromatic tanks, replacement of interior piping and meters, and I believe some of that has been addressed since our evaluation, and redundant metering pumps for the chemical feed systems for a total of $390,000. And long-term improvements include replacement of the floats in the atmospheric storage tanks, replacement of the two well pumps, and replacement of the chemical tanks for a total of $280,000 in long-term costs. We also evaluated a potential interconnection option for the water district. The nearest system is the Dutchess County Water Wastewater Authority Hyde Park Zone D system. It's over a mile away, so it would require approximately 7,700 feet of 12-inch water main, which would also need to take a cross-country route to connect. In addition, a pump station and rechlorination would most likely be required to make that connection. So a total interconnection cost of over $5 million. So that's not really a direction I believe the district would move in at this point. However, it is something to keep in mind in the future as either source capacity issues come up or additional water quality issues arise. And so with that, I'll take any questions. Okay.
How about why do I have all brown water right now? I just got a text from my wife.
Oh.
Hi there, I'm Jonathan Sherns. We have a mic that we need to walk around with to hear the questions online. Online, we won't be able to.
Well, how about all brown water like my wife just texted me right now in the house? I live on 3 Waters Edge Road. Huh? Well, you're the expert.
Without seeing the water myself, I mean, my guess is it's probably related to the iron and manganese water quality issue.
Every other day. Day or night, it's happening all the time. We're fed up with it. If it's not filthy water, it's smell from the plant behind the house, you know?
So, if I may, I'm Jonathan Sherns, Water Authority. What you're most likely experiencing is the iron and manganese dropping out in the distribution system, and
Where's it dropping? Right into my living room?
understood. And so flushing is the way that we're trying to remove that from the system, as well as sequestering it before it makes it out into the system so that it doesn't build up.
Every other day, you get up to go to work, you have filthy brown water. You come home, you go to cook, you got filthy brown water. You want to put in the shower, you're showering in filthy brown water. We're fed up.
Understood. So if you understand, what we're going here is to try and address some of those issues, and iron and manganese from the...
Why don't you hook us up to the main system here that they have in town here? That's got to be better than what we have, filthy brown water.
So if we could go back to the
Yeah, so, I mean,
Understood.
addressing that comment, that's exactly what we were looking at in terms of alternatives. So when we were looking at the treatment alternative, which would be treating the water to remove that iron and manganese, which is most likely causing that color issue.
Going on quite a while now.
Yeah,
Understood. You just like-
I'm not surprised. We looked at 14 years of data and it hasn't changed in 14 years. It's gone up over that time. You know,
If I may add about the water, George Corolla, 11 Abbey, had the same problem years gone by, and the system has not been flushed regularly. I have a hydrant right on I'm at a dead-end cul-de-sac. Once they finally fixed the hydrant and flushed it continuously several times, my water quality improved tremendously. My house filter I don't have to change it as regularly. It's not as dirty. So it did get a lot of sediment out of the system. I'm sure that's part of the answer to that. I experienced the same thing.
It's been a lot worse now.
So one of the efforts that's been made by the town operator is to repair the hydrants in the system over the last year, and I believe at this point all the hydrants have been put back into service, and they've been doing, is it monthly flushing during the summer months?
You gotta pass the microphone.
Probably about 3 times throughout the summer months, actually, we did last year. Not all the hydrants were functioning. The last flush we did, which I believe was sometime in September, all the hydrants were actually working. So that was the last time we did a flush. We'll be probably ramping it up more next year now that all the hydrants are working. I don't know that they'll be doing monthly, but it'll be based on how bad they are when we do it the first time, which will be as soon as the weather breaks.
And so if there's also groundwater, another issue that could be there is there might be a break, so it would be good for him to pass his street address to you, and maybe as the town operator, you can look at that tomorrow.
It's filthy again. That can be filters in that house.
I need your address and information afterwards so we can.
I've been coming to the supervisor's office. I've been talking to this gentleman here. This has been, you know.
Yeah, and I said we can talk after. I actually spoke with you and Dale about this. He's right behind the sewer plant, where they have a tremendous amount of smell from the plant, and they've had some water issues. So I thought Dale made contact, and that didn't happen, but we'll have to get that corrected.
Is it the whole street?
Yeah, is it the whole street that's experiencing it?
And we have the same issue all the time. Brown.
So
anything homeowners can do to, system like a homeowner can do to put in to help their quality if they're experiencing worse than some of the others?
the Department of Health does not generally recommend point-of-use units. There are possibly some units that could be put in, and we could look at that and make a recommendation. But if you had your hand up.
Go ahead.
Okay. So clearly the system has issues, and so what we're here to talk about tonight is how do we understand those problems and then move forward. And so there are recommendations that are being made to both look at the current treatment system as well as a newer system that might be able to more effectively remove the iron and manganese and hopefully resolve the issue at your facility, possibly adding 1 or 2 more hydrants in the system to deal with dead ends. And then there's also the alternative of interconnecting with the Hyde Park Regional Water System, which we showed that one slide of, and it's very expensive to do that. And so we see that as a definitely an option, but we should make sure that we've addressed the low-cost solutions first to try to bring the system back into compliance and address your issue and make it so that you no longer have dirt water.
Good money into bad, our tax dollars.
Understood.
If it's going to keep happening, keep deteriorating, we're going to have to keep doing this over and over again, then why not hook us into the municipal system and then forget about it? We don't have any more problems.
So one of the conversations tonight is that the town for a very long time has owned and operated the system and has attempted to continue to operate the system and address the issues. Since it's been turned over to the town, almost 30 years have gone by. And over that time, back from the 70s, the health department had indicated that the iron and manganese was an issue. One of the things that we're talking about tonight is the transfer of the system to the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. We are professionals, and this is all that we do, water and sewer. And I would hope that we could bring light to the situation and help us to move it forward and address it. So,
I hope so too.
understood. And we'll take down your information so we can learn a little bit more about what you're experiencing, make sure that there's not another issue in the system that's more acute, like a break. And so we'll talk to that at the end. We'll definitely get together.
All right.
Great.
And-
What's the term fire flow that you're referring to?
That would be the flow required per ISO insurance standards to provide sufficient capacity to fight a fire for an individual residence, or depending on the system, there are condominiums in the Greenfield system. So for those, that would really dictate the necessary flow for the system. So for a residential unit, it would be, I believe, 750 gallons per minute for 2 hours. And for condominium type structures, it's greater than that.
The fire hydrants that we have those are not fire hydrants.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Those are
And I
flushing
think most people don't
hydrants.
realize that the fire hydrants that you see there are flushing hydrants. They're not fire hydrants.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, currently, there's not sufficient flows from those hydrants, so they're purely flushing hydrants.
The suck and dry is what it's called.
Maybe you could just explain, Jonathan, that that's not specific to Greenfields,
That no longer,
that we don't have fire flow.
Right, that's pretty typical for a lot of the systems.
I'm not
Right,
concerned,
right.
I'm just,
Yeah.
want to know what that terminology is all about.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll just explain how we deal with fires. Because
oh, the rural fire.
The fire department owns the pump.
that's right.
Who owns Greenfield Water and Sewer?
Well, the town owns and operates it, and it's basically the district residents who pay into the system. And so even though we own and operate it, it's really your system, just for the people who live in Greenfield.
Yeah, I just wanted to know who owns it.
Yeah, we own and operate it right now. And so really, we're here tonight to talk about the advantages of transferring this ownership from the town to the Water Authority. And, you know, just to give a little background, you know, when Ken and I came into office in 2012, one of the first things we really had to confront was the condition of these water and sewer districts. And we were struck by what residents need, that really many of them are operating in a way that is not optimal, as we all know, right? I mean, there's dirty water and
Yeah, I'm not trying to hold you accountable.
no, I don't mind being held accountable because it was a learning process for all of us. And truthfully, you know, VRI came into the business at the same time we did. We came in together, and it's been a difficult learning experience in many ways. So, you know, there are a lot of advantages to transferring the district to what we believe is an entity that has the expertise and the time to really be able to address the maintenance and the capital improvements that this district needs. I'll send it right over after.
Ken Schneider, 4th Ward Town Councilman. And first, I want to thank Dutchess County Water and Wastewater for doing this. I tell you, that what really opened my eyes up about the county taking over the water and wastewater of your system is for issues like you have. I can tell you that this administration, Aileen Rohr, myself, and the other council have spent hours upon hours upon hours really studying and trying to figure out how to make brown water clean and how to make, you know, water clean, and it's been almost a full-time job. You know, I don't live in that system. I have a well and a septic, and I can tell you that I take this job serious that you guys have clean water. I mean, when someone buys a home in Greenfields, they just expect that they're going to have clean water, and they flush the toilet, and it goes down. And to be able to use their backyard. That is correct. And what ends up happening, and it was just, you know, it was mentioned lightly here, but historically in Hyde Park, you have turnover of boards, and every 2 years you have new administration. And so when you have a different politician sitting up there every 2 years, or even every 4 years, it's a learning curve for that individual to try to figure out, whoa, what did I get myself into? And thank God we had Pete from Moore's Associates, that he's been like the only standard that we've had here in Hyde Park that understands the sewer system, so he was able to try to at least get us up to speed. The advantage of having the county take over this program of running your water and sewer is that they are a 24-hour watchdog for you. You don't have to worry about who's elected. Are they doing the right thing by the water and sewer? Are they not willing to spend the money because they don't want to raise the taxes? That's an issue. And water and sewer should not be a politician's job to figure out what gets done and what doesn't get done. It really should be done by an authority that knows how to make sure your water is drinkable, and how to make sure that the sewer is being done properly. So I think by the end of this presentation that you'll see here tonight, I think you'll be really satisfied to see what the county can do. Has the town failed in some areas? I think we sure have. I mean, when you get turnover of people, it's hard to keep things straight. And I know you had issues when I knocked on your door. You know, I've heard about it, and it hasn't gotten better. And then the answers that you get are not correct sometimes.
Well, the problem is we don't get any answers.
Correct.
It burns us, nobody gets back.
Right.
to us.
Right. And so by having the county, this is all they do. It's 24/7. And so the buck will stop with them. It's not, you give me a call, or you call the supervisor's office, and then I get a hold of VRI, then I hope VRI gets a hold of you, and I think it's done, and it's not done. There's just too many hands in it, and unfortunately, you end up losing. And I hate that for you. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, I think you'll see what the county can offer. I can tell you that the county has done a tremendous job on the Route 9 side here. We don't have any water quality issues at all. When there is an issue, it's taken care of promptly. I don't think we've ever gotten a phone call in Town Hall about water issues on the Route 9 side, because 24 hours a day, you guys are out there doing that. So I have to apologize that things aren't being done completely right up in Greenfields. I mean, the buck stops with me being the council person. But I can tell you that we have a great council that I've been working with for the past 12 to 18 months with this process of trying to figure out what is the issues, how to correct them, and how to move forward. And you have Charlie Cullen here, you have Lynn here, who have spent numerous hours and evenings out going over this study. So I just ask for your patience. Let's get through this, and I think you'll see by the end a lot of your questions might be answered. And if they're not, I think you have enough people here that can at least get some of your questions answered. Your problems might not be solved tonight, but you will get some answers to your questions tonight, I hope.
I was just going to ask, so you talking about transferring of the ownership and the management, or both? The ownership and the management? And you answered some of my questions about what would be some of the benefits of moving to the county line. So if we move to the county line, are we still going to keep all the same wells and stuff that we have currently, or is going to be a fresh pipe that pumps in the water? Or
that was just the county line was just an option that they explored to see what the cost would be. As was stated with Jonathan, it was over $5 million to do that. Now remember, the water and sewer for Greenfields, you guys that use that system pay for that. It's not throughout the whole town. So that if we did $5 million, that would come out of your pocket. And that's just not prohibited right now to do something like that. There is other avenues that we are exploring that I think could work extremely well. And we'll be going through that shortly here. So.
Yeah, I'm going to turn things over to Jonathan, who's going to talk a little bit about how the transfer would be, and then it'll go into the wastewater portion of the presentation.
Let me just do a height adjustment here. Okay. Can you hear me okay? I'm Jonathan Cherns with the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. I'm working with the town of Hyde Park for about 2 years now, working to secure the grants and complete the engineering report evaluations and work with our consultants that you've met so far tonight and move this forward into a study on how we would transfer the system while analyzing how the Water Authority would operate the system in a different manner. And yes, this would be the transfer of the ownership of the system, and the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority would then manage it, continuing to use the contract operator that has been there for several years and continue with their knowledge to move the system forward. So ultimately what we've done here is create a study and a plan that show how the transition would occur, and it takes a lot of the items that have been addressed by the engineer, moving them forward so that we can understand the costs and the timeframes to those. First, I would like to thank the New York State Department of State for their contribution of the grant money that was awarded to the town that helped to fund these. It was a 90% application of state funds to your project, and has allowed for a complete and independent understanding of your system so that we can move that forward. And we also have a representative, Carl Ublocker, from the state here tonight, and thank you for your presence. The Greenfields water system, a quick review of how we would move this forward. The Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority is a group of professionals. We have operators holding the highest licenses and would look to come to your system and understand it holistically with an outcome-based solution set. We have taken the engineers' urgent and short-term items and prioritized them how we feel would be best to move the system forward at the most economical cost possible. In many cases, the way the engineer has defined the costs that go along with the improvements that may be necessary at different points in the system, they're set up as individual projects that are designed, bidded, and then constructed by contractors, and they're all considered as an individual project. That can sometimes inflate the cost, and so what we've tried to do here is look at it from the perspective of how we would use our staff as well as our contract operators to complete the projects in-house and move them forward at the most economical way, while having an appropriate solution to better the water quality and move that situation forward. In some cases, we would look to evaluate and do bench tests on the water to see how it could be improved, using possibly the current treatment system that's in place to sequester the iron and manganese, or move forward with a new treatment model. Prior to seeking any major capital projects, we would look to look to these in-house solutions and try to resolve the issues within the system without spending the larger dollars. Within the first 5 years, there are certain immediate, urgent items that need to be addressed, and the list that you have before you includes items that are related to safety and security, operator safety, security of the facility, and as we go down the left side, there's install lockable well caps, making sure that the caps are watertight and they cannot be opened and people throw things down in them. Provide fire protection through fire extinguishers, eye wash stations for operator safety, installing basic screens on certain atmospheric tanks, making sure that the manholes to the tanks are lockable, conducting iron and manganese sampling from the raw water. This has been mentioned a couple of times through the day, through this presentation. Iron and manganese is what is affecting your community and creating the dark water, plugging service lines from time to time when the manganese builds up, and there are certain things that are done by the operator to try and clear that through flushing, using certain additives into the system that help to bind up the iron and manganese so that it doesn't drop out in the distribution system and then cause the problems that you're experiencing. We would look to, within the first 5 years, probably in the first year, look to address those by having our operators go in and work with the contract operator to understand how is the system set up. Do you have the right chemical feed pumps? Are the injectors put into the right point in the pipe so that you get good mixing? And are those injection points separated from the other components in the system that may stop that sequestering from occurring? And so we would take a lot of those steps to move and improve the water quality in the system. There are certain components in the building that would need to be replaced, piping and so on. We're having discussions with the town and the operator on how they would like to move that forward, possibly before we take over the system. Simple protection for some of the propane piping, flow testing for your wells. As you've seen, you have an aquifer and many straws have been drilled into it over the many decades that this system has operated. 4 are currently operational. They are considered to have declining capabilities to provide flow, and so we would want to ascertain what their current capability is through doing flow tests. Instrumentation on those wells so that you can record and keep track of that data over time so you can see trends and respond appropriately and before things become worse. Flow meters, understanding how much is flowing from those production wells, regrading around the wells, providing redundant meter pumps, clean and inspect the atmospheric tank. There's a certain amount of iron and manganese that can drop out in the tank, and cleaning that out may help to improve some of the water quality in the system. by removing it at the start. Emergency lights, dehumidifier, sump pumps, and then some minor conduit work. The totality of this work that would be done in the first 5 years is $110,000. We would look to fund this out of your fund balance as well as current revenues. Greenfields is a system where you need to consider your long-term options. Obviously, there is that potential to interconnect with the Hyde Park Regional Water System, but it's very expensive and would probably be not economically feasible. So we need to try and work within the bounds that you have with your existing water treatment plant. There are certain improvements that need to be done immediately. They have booster pumps, building repairs, roof masonry, paint, doors, frames, replace panel boards, which are the electrical panels where the circuit breakers are. These are items that come to a total of $184,000. One thing to keep in mind here is that these things will need to be done if you're going to stay with this current water treatment plant. If we go to the next slide, there is another level of treatment that could be added, and it would be another module. There are multiple different ways to go. It comes with a price tag of about $1.5 million. Those necessary improvements would still need to be done, and that brings you to $1.7 million. With the iron and manganese treatment, if we were to go to this higher level, we would need to do pilot testing, as well as construct the actual treatment to remove the iron and manganese. It would make the most sense to hold off on those necessary improvements until we decide whether or not the current sequestration treatment process works for the system if modified, or if it would be possible to move forward and combine that with a new treatment unit. And now I'd like to turn it over to Bridget Barkley, who will speak to the financial items of the system.
No, I'm just, the first two slides that you ran there, that particular slide. Most of those items there, I'm kind of baffled, because that's something you do regular maintenance. You know, you don't wait 5 years to do things like that. No locks on no caps on the well, and a lot of things like that. A fire extinguisher.
Right, so what we've done here is this builds on the engineering evaluation. These aren't things different than what the engineers identified. We're now talking about how do you implement them, where do you get the money from. So we combined items that the engineers identified as urgent and that needed to be done over 5 years to look at, does the system have fund balance to cover these? How much can you do through your operating budget? So you're absolutely right. There are things on this list like the well caps and the fire extinguisher and the eye wash station that you just do right away, and you use part of the system fund balance to do those. Some of the other things.
Right away, I would think that should be in the station already.
Right.
You know,
right.
As a part of safety. And,
right. And there are items that were identified through the engineering evaluation that have already been done. And, you know, we also don't want to, all of this is a work in progress. Things continue to happen as time passes. The town is still operating the systems. VRI is there on a daily basis. They're looking at all these issues. We're working with the town on these as we move forward. So by the time, if the town decides to go forward with the transfer and the authority takes us over, a lot of these will probably be done. It really was the value of having the money through the grant to do a complete evaluation of the system that enabled people to understand the system as a whole, what needed to be done, how to move those things forward and get the work done. So as we talk, things are being done. The contract operator has come in with some proposals recently to address some of the items on these lists that we're helping the town evaluate the best way to go forward. So yeah, some of these things have been done, some should be done now, some of them are going to happen over the next 5 years. The purpose of this is really to give you an idea of how much we expect is going to be spent over the next 5 years and how that's going to impact on your budget.
Question for you. I'm sure we need a tremendous amount of work done. I'm sorry. I'm sure we need a tremendous amount of work done within both facilities.
Right,
If we transfer ownership, if the town transfers ownership,
right.
what stops or prevents Dutchess County wastewater from coming in and say, we have to do $4 million worth of improvements, and you have to pay? And when does it get to the point where I can't afford to stay in my house any longer? And where are the checks and balances on how much is spent and what it's spent on?
Sure. So lots of checks and balances all along the way. Like the town board, our board is a public organization. They're subject to open meetings, freedom of information law. As I indicated previously, we provide customers information on what's happening with the systems. We work with public advisory groups. If we're talking about improvements that we're funding through the operation and maintenance budget, that budget is developed and approved annually by the authority board. We develop that budget as a draft. We provide it to elected officials in the town where we're working in any of our systems, to the elected officials at the county level, so your county legislator. If you have citizen advisory groups, we present the draft budget to citizen advisory groups. Some of our systems, we have individual customers who've asked to be on the mailing list to get a copy of things like a draft budget. We hold a public hearing before our board to get feedback from customers on the budget and the proposed rates. And then it is the authority board of directors that has the legal authority and responsibility to establish the rates for the system.
Thank you very much. I do have, so there is no actual accountability to the taxpayers of the district, sort of like a school budget where expenditures have to be voted upon. There is no accountability back to the people within the district, or they won't have a say on what exactly the expenditures or repairs would be. If you say it's $4 million, it's $4 million, and we have to pay that whether it's bonded or out of an operating budget. Am I correct?
No.
Okay.
So we've talked about the operating budget and that process. And, you know, on the one hand, you're right. You don't get to vote for the authority board of directors like you get to vote for the town supervisor. But you do get to vote for the town supervisor. You do get to vote for your county legislators. You do get to vote for the county executive. And
On the board?
no,
of
but
Dutchess County Water
they
vote on expenditures.
appoint our board members, and we need approval from the county to move forward with projects. So the other part of the equation is when we're looking at significant improvements that need to be bonded, we do go to the county legislature, and they are required to consent to the issuance of our bonds. So we will present to them information about the improvements that are being made, what the cost of those improvements are, and the county legislature has to vote to consent to the issuance of the bonds.
And
They have no idea where Hyde Park is. That's not what.
Well, but you have county legislators in Hyde Park. You have Nick Ignafo, you have Rich Perkins,
and if you
that
don't-
are
if
the
you don't mind,
legislators.
Jonathan Churns, who is part of the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, who lives in Hyde Park. Jonathan has spent hours upon hours upon hours here, and you have an advisory committee that meets in Hyde Park, you know, from Greenfields, that meets on a quarterly, it could be bi-quarterly, you know, it's really as needed. We have a big issue, thank God you guys don't live in Pine Brook, that's been a mess. And with Pine Brook, there was things that Dutchess County Water and Wastewater brought to the attention to our operators on how to do things differently that saved that community a lot of money. Those guys have the expertise. they're not going to, it'd be easy for them to say, hey, listen, guys, the easiest thing is to spend $5.5 million, let's hook up to the Hyde Park water and wastewater and be done with it. As the slide stated earlier, there's other ways that they want to make sure that we are going through the process of making sure that we're being as efficient as possible. It's no different if Pete from Morris said, hey, Ken, when I first got into office, we need to have a magnesium system put in, and it's going to cost 1.7. You guys necessarily didn't have a say on that. It's really, it's done between the board, and then the board makes that decision, and then we impose that fee on you. But again, that's not what any politician, that's why I say we really need to keep the politicians out of it, because we're going to need to make sure that your water's not brown. We need to make sure that, you know, when the value of your home is based upon, do you have clean water? I mean, water is liquid gold today. You got to have clean water. The county is not looking to spend $5 million frivolously to make sure your system, they understand the homeowner, they understand that there's expenses, and they want to make sure that they do things as efficiently and as productively as possible.
So to get back to the financial evaluation, again, what we did was to look at the overall financial health of the system, just like we looked at the physical condition. What's the rate structure? How much money is that generating? How does that compare to the expenses? Is there a fund balance available to cover unexpected expenses and to fund some of the improvement items that have been identified? So we start with your current rate. Right now, it's a flat rate of $42.50 a quarter, plus a usage charge of $4.25 per 1,000 gallons. Based on average water use, a typical customer in Greenfields Water is paying about $245 a year for your water. We looked at the budget for the town, again, revenues and expenses over a number of years, actual revenues and expenses for 2011, 12, and 13, the budget that the town adopted for 2014, where they expect to end 2014, and then the budget that the town has adopted in 2015.
Richard, I'm sorry, could you just, I know we've sat through a number of presentations. What is the average cost per year for water?
Based on figures that the New York State Comptroller puts together, there is not a lot of data collection in New York State across all of the water and sewer systems, but there is data collected by the New York State Comptroller, who has to approve the creation of a new district. So they will collect data over a number of years on any new systems that are coming in, and they're using an average cost right now for a typical household of $862 a year is their cost for 2015. So Greenfields is well below that. So we look each year at what was the fund balance at the beginning of the year, what was your total amount of expenses. We've consolidated some of the individual lines in the budget to make it easier to see the big picture. What were the revenues, and then where did you end up as far as the fund balance? And there's a couple of things that, you know, I think are interesting to note here. The system in the past has had significant amounts of fund balance, but in the last couple of years has been decreasing that fund balance to use to offset some of the system expenses. There have been some increases in expenses. There have been some very high equipment repair and maintenance expenses. That 2013, a lot of that was the cost of doing some of that hydrant work that we talked about earlier, fixing hydrants in the system so that it could be flushed better and improve the water quality.
With those hydrants, there were 7 hydrants that were not working at all. So we decided that we were going to take the step to make sure your water was going to start getting cleaner. And so we replaced 7 hydrants to start flushing that system better. We're going to continue to work harder on that. But, this board, in conjunction with, a lot of what the county had to offer during this process, we realized a lot of those issues that that system was having is that we weren't getting the proper flushing. And that's why you saw like all the garbage bags on all those hydrants. Right. Well, we're going to get that corrected, I hope. So we actually replaced 7 hydrants this year, and going to continue to flush even more.
You will find if a system hasn't been flushed in a long time, when you start doing the flushing, you're stirring up material that has accumulated over a significant amount of time. So you will see impacts on water quality. You generally see anytime the flushing is done, the water's stirred up, you're going to see brown water for a period of time. One of the things that's customary to do and that we do with all of our systems is notify people when we're going to be doing flushing to let you know that that's going to happen. We tell people, if you're experiencing dirty water as a result of the flushing, if you can open up an outside tap, if you've got a hose bib on the side of your house, let the water run through that for a while to clear rather than drawing that water into your house. But yeah, well, again, because if you're continuing to add to the system with the iron and manganese that exists, the flushing isn't going to get rid of that. You're trying to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything else we hear was done. Mm-hmm. Our water's gotten worse, not better, worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see the signs of getting better. I just got next complaint by my way, we're drowning again.
Right.
Right, and
right.
We realized,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So your water
right.
hasn't gotten better, and that's something. Right, and that's something that needs to be addressed, but there has residents where the flushing has really helped. So we realize that there is some problems in the system. I think that's all been identified.
Right.
And I think moving forward, there'll at least be a plan in place moving forward to start fixing these things instead of just having lip service saying, well, hopefully it gets better. I think now with the amount of time and energy and money that's been put into this study, we have a much better understanding, and hopefully at the end of this, if the authority is able to take this system over, they'll at least have a map and a plan on how to move forward to make your water better.
I just want somebody to come to the house now or tomorrow or whatever. Tell me what's going on.
Well,
now.
Mark from VRI, he's the owner. Mark will be there tomorrow, I'm sure.
So with no change to the rate, you're looking at, again, using fund balance. I think my clicker's up. No. To offset the expenses of the system. We're looking at the numbers for the 2015 budget and figuring the town's probably really not going to need $40,000 in fund balance to meet their expenses based on what the revenues from the system have been in the past, but you are drawing down the fund balance, and that needs to be evaluated against the cost of those items that need to be addressed. Again, about $110,000 in urgent and short-term improvements, as well as making sure that you've got some money in fund balance for contingency to help with cash flow and to address any unanticipated expenses. We looked at what would the authority budget for this system if we owned and operated Greenfields for 2015. We used 2015 as a base so you can have apples to apples comparison with what the current rate is, what the current budget under the town is. If the system were to transfer to the authority during the year, we would look to prorate the budget for the portion of the year that the authority owned and operated the system. So we're looking in general at expenses that are close to the town, about 2% higher than what the town has budgeted. Some of the differences are that we're looking at more aggressive management and administration of the system. We looked at what historically electrical costs have been and the kind of increases in electrical costs we're seeing in our system with the rate increases. And this is the budget that we've put together of what we would see the expenses being under the authority. So one of the places where we differ from the budget that the town adopted, if you continue to use fund balance to offset the system expenses, it's going to eat into the money that's available to address those short-term and urgent improvements. So you can do that, but at the end of the day, you're eventually going to get to the point where you're going to have to increase the rates in order to fund those items that do need to be addressed. With this budget, if no fund balance was applied to offset the cost of these expenses, and the fund balance was reserved to deal with those urgent and short-term items, you're looking at an increase of about $325 per year per household. We think it's the more prudent approach to take in terms of managing the system, so that the money is there to address those items that have been identified. So again, it's a little bit less. I think it was $6.70 a month increase in what you're spending now, to make up a flat rate of $325 a year to cover those expenses. The other items that we talked about were the long-term improvements, or the longer term, I guess I'll call it, improvements that are needed. We do not see those as being able to be funded out of the fund balance. Again, we were looking at about $180,000 for the booster pump, the electrical panel work that needs to be done regardless of what you do on the iron and manganese, and then the potential that you could be spending as much as $1.5 million to address the iron and manganese problem if it's determined that additional treatment is needed, as opposed to improving the sequestering system that's there. The best way to fund that is through long-term borrowing. You're making an improvement to the system that has a useful life that will benefit people for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So it's an appropriate and a more affordable way to fund those kind of increases. Generally, what the authority does is, when we're looking at capital projects like that, we'll do a short-term ban, a one-year borrowing to cover the cost of doing the engineering, to get the system designed, go through the approval process. And then when we're in construction, then we roll that into a long-term borrowing. So at that point, you're borrowing the amount that you know that you need to do the project, and spreading that over the long term. We do seek out, and very often are able to obtain low-interest loans for improvements to water and sewer systems that we own and operate. We do, like anybody does, try for grants. I will tell you, there's not a lot of grant money out there for water and sewer, and that's not something that's just affecting people in Dutchess County, New York State. It's throughout the country. We are significantly underfunding our infrastructure improvements, but we've been successful in getting low-interest loans through really the major funding program that's out there. That helps reduce the impact of the costs on the ratepayers to pay for these improvements. So again, there are very easy answers to a lot of these problems if you have an unlimited amount of money. You don't have an unlimited amount of money. We don't have access to an unlimited amount of money. So we take an approach that we prioritize what needs to be done. We look to accomplish what we can in-house at a lesser cost than going through a full designed and bid and constructed project. And where there are improvements that are needed and need to be financed, we make sure that we're doing the right improvement, that we know it's going to get the results that you need, and we manage those projects very aggressively to make sure that the costs stay in line. And we have a very good track record as far as bringing projects in within the budgets that are proposed for the improvement projects. So I think that's it as far as the water system. Again, if you have questions for Aaron, for me, for Jonathan, for Ken, Aileen.
I think we have one question here.
Yes, when the study was done, why wasn't the determination of what was needed to treat the magnesium and all the stuff in the water done? Was there a reason why that wasn't done or evaluated? And still need to be assessed whether we're treating the water properly?
I'll give you the quick answer and then see if Aaron wants to add, but it's essentially the amount of funding that was available. There was a certain amount of money that was available from the grant program to deal with the system as a whole, as well as all of the other systems that the town has. So there's a limited amount of what you can get done within the budget for that study. They did, evaluate and thoroughly define the issues. The engineering evaluation gave, I think, a very good path forward. You start right back at the wells. Do all the wells have the same amount of iron and manganese, or some of them higher, some of them lower? Do you find iron and manganese levels get worse with the systems if you're drawing the water level in the wells down more? So they recommended looking at, raw water sampling to understand the different water quality in different wells, monitoring the wells to see, again, if the problem gets better or worse as wells are drawn down. We're looking at the way the sequestration process is working right now to see if that can be tweaked and improved. If all of those options, those are your lower cost options for addressing the problem. If they don't pan out, then you go to looking at pilot testing other types of technology that have been used to treat iron and manganese and see how applicable they are to this system. So all those kinds of evaluation are included in that $1.5 million number to address the iron and manganese, as well as going through the selection of a solution and then the design and construction of that specific solution. But that was just more than could be done with the amount of money available for the initial engineering evaluation.
All right, if you don't mind, it's about 20 after 8. Maybe we can move on to the sewer.
Sure.
And then we can get
Open
back to
it
the
up.
water after, if you don't mind.
Do I shut this one off? Hmm?
Hi, I'm Erin Moore from Ty and Bond. Oh, those are my kids. Oh, and we started over. Sorry about that. I'm going to just quickly flip through here. Have patience with me. I hit the wrong button. We're getting there. So that's me, Erin Moore, and I was the team leader for our wastewater facilities evaluation. So I'm going to describe what we did as part of that wastewater evaluation. The first item we reviewed was plant capacity. The permitted capacity of the Greenfields plant is 132,000 gallons per day. The average flow to the plant is 70,000 gallons per day, so that's clearly under that capacity. However, we looked at flows over time. Inflow and infiltration is the act of storm water getting into your sewer system. And some days, your one peak day had a flow, and that's the daily flow, of 407,000 gallons per day. So that's clearly over the plant capacity. So I&I, what is that? With everything else, sewer systems get old over time, and groundwater can get into the system through cracks and holes in the pipes and manholes, and that's called infiltration. On accident, or sometimes on purpose, stormwater can be put into the sewer system. That can be through catch basins, accidentally connected sump pumps in basements, or even through manhole lids that have perforations in them. And this is called inflow. So why do we care about these items? Huge flows in the systems damage pipes. They damage the biology in the treatment plant. They cause the plant to flood. They cause permit violations, which can equal fines, so that's a problem. And in general, you're paying to treat clean water at the plant. So we want to avoid stormwater getting into our sewer system. It's really important. So we also reviewed the quality of the treated wastewater effluent, And there were several effluent violations from 2008 to 2014, which is what I'm showing in this table here. The biological oxygen demand and ammonia levels were the quality issues in the effluent. So effluent means the wastewater that gets discharged to the stream. Those were higher than permitted, allowed in the discharge. And as expected, based on what we just discussed, there were several times that the flow level was violated and above the permit capacity. So that certainly is an issue. And finally, we completed an evaluation of the physical components of the system. So the wastewater system includes about 18,500 feet of 8-inch sewer with 78 manholes, and a wastewater treatment plant that has a headworks, primary clarifier, rotating biological contactor treatment units, secondary clarifiers, an aeration basin, sand filters, and a disinfection system and a flow meter. This is actually, for a plant this size, quite a nice list. Around the same time frame, there was a different style of plant built frequently without primary clarifiers that can be even more troublesome as they get to this age. So it's a pretty complete plant as far as unit processes. So in general, both the collection system and the treatment system, they're in fair condition. So the collection system evaluation was completed on March 18th, and what you might have seen people around in the street looking down manholes, and that's what we can do is look in the manholes. The pipes you can't inspect as easily. So, and what we found was 8 manholes with heavy infiltration through the walls, and they're circled in pink, and 9 with no infiltration shells. What you have in the system is lids under the manholes that are plastic to stop stormwater from getting in, and there were 9 manholes that had lost their shells one way or the other. Those are circled in blue. 4 manholes with broken frames that can allow water to get in, and 1 manhole that had roots growing right through the manhole. That's circled in green. So if roots can get through, water can get through. So we identified all those problem locations. As a result, just with some historical knowledge and some of the manhole inspections, we TV inspected the lines that are highlighted. Oh, maybe instead of pointing, I'll show you with this. Here we go. The lines shown in yellow, we actually took a camera and ran it through those lines. What we found is, this picture doesn't show it, but there's a pond right here. Right through this section, there was a very heavy sag in the pipe, conveniently right where the pond outlet crosses, but unfortunately, we couldn't get a camera through there. However, that's definitely a suspect location and clearly a place, pipes for wastewater, they all slope, they gotta flow downhill, and so if there's a sag in the pipe, things are not flowing as they should be. So that's an area we need to come back and that's gonna take some additional investigation or probably digging up to find out what's going on in that section. We also identified a lot of service connections that had pristine, clear flow coming out of them, and it was the middle of the day, no cars in the driveway. That typically means there's groundwater getting into those connections and flowing through. And we also identified various sections of pretty cracked and damaged pipe. Just that, again, over time, it's aged and it's not aging gracefully, let's say. So based on our inspection of the collection system and then our inspection of the plant and all those items we talked about, we identified some urgent improvements. And just, there was a question asked about this, but yes, one would hope most of these urgent improvements that we didn't see any of them. We want fire extinguishers and eye wash everywhere, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. And so while our main goal is to identify equipment and capital issues that need to be fixed, of course, we note down where we're concerned about safety issues and shared that with the town and the and Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. So that's some of these issues. So there is, the urgent issues don't involve the collection system. They're mainly at the plant. The plant's missing a lot of safety signage. A lot of the tanks lack appropriate railing that has no mid-bar, so it'd be very easy to accidentally fall in tanks, and some tanks don't have any railing at all. Equipment machine guards, emergency disconnect switches to stop equipment if, you know, something bad should happen. And the main treatment building had no open way of secondary means of egress. There's an underground fuel storage tank under the generator that we just have quite a few concerns about. The dosing tank control panel, the operator actually had to manually switch the motor starter on a high voltage system, so we thought that seemed like we should spend some time fixing that quickly. And also the chemical system lacks secondary containment, so if there's a spill, there's nothing to stop that. So those were our urgent issues, as well as eyewash. That's come up quite a few times. It was lacking eyewash. So those are I think many of those issues, or at least several of them, have been resolved or on their way to being resolved right now. So as far as short-term improvements go, we had recommendations for the collection system. So within the next 5 years, we really recommend there are some easements that seem to need to be straightened out and obtained if necessary. Sealing and repairing those manholes that we noted were in really poor condition. The ones having I&I clearly coming through them. And we really think an I&I study should be initiated to get a handle on where all this extra flow is coming from, because it's clearly really limiting your capacity to treat your wastewater appropriately. For the treatment plant for the next 5 years, the recommended improvements, our first improvement's pretty simple, but it's development of a sludge tank and sand filter operation plan. We think whoever's operating the facility maybe should talk to the design engineer again, and possibly this has been taken care of, but some of those BOD and ammonia problems, there's methods of handling sludge that we thought could be made a lot smoother. And probably maybe weren't being handled at the time within the recommendations of the design engineer. The sludge tank is pretty brand new and in really good condition, but it seemed to be shocking the system and maybe causing some die-offs. So we just recommended a plan be formed on really what is the right O&M for those two components. That was a really good place to start. So,
Covers for those tanks.
pardon me?
Covers for those tanks.
The sand filters?
No, there's outside pits.
Well, we could talk about that. And that's definitely a future, you know what, that's coming up. Hold on, we'll just get to there quickly. Okay. The sand filters, they just get overgrown often, so having O&M for them is pretty important as well. So the primary clarifiers, they suffered a frozen line in 2014, and the sludge line was significantly damaged. It's been repaired, but the way of removing sludge from the tank, it's called an airlift. It's not pumped, it uses air to remove the sludge. That's not a recommended method for primary sludge removal, which is where this takes place. So we really recommend the primary clarifiers have sludge pumps and not the airlift system. And that's a recommendation we think should be a short-term improvement. The secondary clarifier tanks, they're shown here. They're original equipment, 1969, steel tanks. They're not within design conformance for size, for doing what they need to do. We really recommend a plan needs to be started and designed to replace these tanks, because they're significantly rusting and are going to be failing if plans not started to get them replaced. The air system is also quite old, and the problem is there's not sufficient air at the plant to run all the things that need to be run. So one thing that can happen is, and maybe if someone can help me remember, but the sludge tank air, it's often continuously aerated, and that's what helps the odor control. But if they need the air somewhere else in the plant, then the sludge tank gets turned off. And just the air, the blower systems that are there are not suitable. There's just not capacity to run everything that needs air at the plant at the same time. So there's, we got to turn this off. And then the air valving itself, the day we did the inspection, there was just air coming out a joint, just leaking out. I know that's been fixed since, but there's just not sufficient capacity to keep that aerated, and if that's aerated, you don't have the odors. So that, I know that's been a priority of theirs, to keep that tank with air, but if you need the air somewhere else, you can't do that. So replacing these blowers with new high-efficiency blowers, that's something that we're recommending as a short-term improvement. Now, everyone said this, but I'm just going to say this again. We looked at every single project as a budgetary item that is done by an outside contractor and is done out of house, and there's contingency on it. So the sum of all of these projects together is $1.2 million. However, certainly if different projects were addressed together, if they were addressed in-house, and certainly there's the capability to do some of that, obviously costs would be reduced. But what our job was very important, to isolate a cost per each item as if it was done outside. So, oh, I have outfall clearing up there too, but I think that's been done. There's a lot of brush on the way to where the pipe discharges to the stream, and that was cited by the DEC in one of their inspections. So long-term improvements. I'll get my notes here. So for the collection system, again, we'd like to see within the next 15 years ongoing continued manhole and pipe repair. And we have put in sort of a placeholder number for repairing some pipe identified in the I&I study we recommended under short-term improvements. So that's really what you need to focus on, is if there's a good way to identify, if that study can identify where to focus the money to do pipe repair and try to get some of that stormwater out of the system, because that's just going to help everything. So and then within that cost, there's various minor facility repairs that are smaller and not significant projects. Headworks improvements. So the headworks is the first thing that flow comes into in the plant. And currently we have a grinder that takes care of that. That structure actually floods itself, so the concrete itself wall needs to be raised about 6 to 8 inches to stop from, when these heavy storms come through, it actually flooding. However, what's a big problem, this is my very brief PSA, facing a lot of wastewater collection systems is baby wipes. Baby wipes get ground up, but they never disappear, and they end up clogging other parts of the plant. We found a lot of baby wipes. They do not go away. They should never, ever be flushed. Don't flush baby wipes. They cause havoc on your plant. Okay, so the problem is, though, if everyone in this room stops doing that, they're going to keep coming to the plant. So we put in, as the grinder reaches the end of its service life, you might want to consider, and we recommended switching to a screening type thing. So instead of grinding up the rags that come in the system, it actually removes that debris and takes it out of this flow, so it's not continuing on to the other parts of your plant. The primary clarifier equipment. So again, primary clarifier is concrete, but the equipment is original from '69. So the fact it's still operating as good as it is and as reliably as it is great. But you've got to start assuming within the next 15 years that equipment is, it's there already. It's doing well, but it's got to be on the radar that that's going to go down. So the tanks themselves, they're in good condition, but the equipment, the mechanical equipment is going to need to be replaced. The treatment building. So this is the treatment building down here. So these are your RBC units, and they're these big cylindrical objects, and they dip into wastewater and come back up, and biology grows on them, and that's what treats things. However, this is a wood and plywood building. There's no ventilation or heat, and so pretty much there's very, very high humidity in the building. So that's what we could do. We could vent it, but then you'd have to heat it, and that creates a really big utility cost. So we recommend that this building's at the end of its life. It should come down and just use fiberglass enclosures over these RBC units and get rid of trying to house them in a building. However, the other half of this building is what has the chemical system, and that also has had its own damage on the building in the area where the chlorine is, and that should go into a much smaller building that's meant to house chlorine. And then you can always put up a little shed for your yard stuff, that, prefabricated shed for the yard maintenance equipment. And so getting away from this building that's really does not have a great environment for the equipment in it is what we're recommending. The sand filters, we talked about them before. You can see maybe this center piece right here is literally split open. That's a concrete circle, and they're cracked wide open, several of them. So there's improvements to the sand filters that need to be made. Some of this is pressure treated back here, and some of that's fallen in. And then sand has a limited life, and so within 15 years, media replacement for the sand filter is going to need to take place. The control building, it needs a new roof. That generator's got to go. Some of the panels inside, some of the lights, and so there's improvements to the control building itself. So again, looking at each of those projects independently, our total long-term cost for the system is we'll say $1.3 million. And I think that concludes what I'm presenting. Is there questions?
I'd like to do a lot of renovations in my house too. Doesn't mean I can't still live.
Oh, take. Wait, shh, no, wait. Oh, I didn't mean to, I'm sorry, just, he starts beeping.
I was just making an analogy. Renovations I'm sure are needed, but they really need to be done right away. I mean, are these functional items that we have that can be done over time, or are they going to be done right away? I know there's long and short term of it.
Oh, yeah, so, and I think that's what I've tried to explain, where some of the things are. The secondary clarifiers, I think we have some other pictures of them up. Here's your challenge. It's your risk versus reward. So, if the secondary, you plan on replacing them, get a design and get them in, you have money you're going to spend. However, if the secondary clarifiers develop a hole in the bottom or their mechanisms stop working, the cost input is going to be that plus, oh, now we really need to start replacing them. So within the next 5 years, planning to replace your secondary clarifiers, it would be a pretty high priority item if it was me. Steel tanks rust, and definitely steel tanks installed in 1969, so.
And what was great about the study, remember, this was a study, and this was, we had the engineers go in and say, okay, if best case scenario, we had all the money in the world, what needs to be done? And they looked at the whole system. I mean, you guys really have a complete workup of the system. And that's where, we look at what the short term is. Now, since this is all, documented, we realize that we should have fire extinguisher. We should have, the eye wash, those simple things. There are things, like you said, we all live in a house and we would love to have a brand new kitchen, but sometimes we have to live with the old kitchen and just replace appliances in here and there. And that's what we'd be doing here. But what we asked them to do is give us a full picture of the system, and best case scenario, we had all the money in the world, what needs to be done. And so again, this is just kind of a map on where the system is and steps to improve the system with the smell, with the air lifts and all that. So we really have a really good map on what really needs to happen today, what should happen tomorrow, and then what needs to happen in the future. So, and again, the county really has worked well. I've met with Jonathan and with the committee on the short term that needs to be done today, which has already been taken care of. And then, of course, we have the worst case, which that'll be in the future. But I understand what you're saying. We're with you.
If you could hold your question for a second.
Sure.
There you go. You may proceed, sir.
Oh,
We were just waiting for the mic to reach you.
Need a lot of microphone. But in, say this,
We changed the slide.
the system transfers, and there's a project that requires bonding. Where do I see that number personally? Right now, I see it on my town tax bill.
Okay, I got you. You would see it on your property tax bill still. it would be a line item identified as coming from the county sewer district, but it would still come on that once a year February timeframe town county property tax bill.
What is our, the system's present indebtedness that's left from bonding?
What's still owed on the system? You know what that is?
I'm looking to Bridget.
It should be just about down to zero.
It's not. I know you have I'm trying to remember if I'm thinking of, it was part of a bond in 2011 that the town did for improvements to a number of town-owned facilities.
Well,
Yeah, no, there's, yeah. Yeah, we can get it for you. I know that, I thought I had a number on what, currently the town, the debt, the per customer cost on the debt is, but I don't have that number in front of me. We can get it for you. But it was a bond in 2011 that the town did for improvements to the sewer system. So there is quite a few more years to pay that down.
Okay, Jonathan, you're all set.
Great. I'm Jonathan Cherns, met me before. I'm just here to go forward with the sewer portion. As I mentioned before, we're here to talk about the reorganization study plan and how the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority would move the facility forward, addressing the issues with the system. Again, we'd like to thank the state for their contribution to the project and the grant funds that were provided through the program. The Dutchess County Authority, similar to what we talked about with the water system, would be looking at your sewer system from a holistic perspective to move the issues out and correct the problems with the system, dealing with the odors, the high influent infiltration, and many of the other issues that we've talked about tonight. We've gone through a process to prioritize the urgent and short-term items and organize them so that we can address them in the first 5 years and meet the system's needs. Typically, we look to do that through in-house solutions with our certified operators, whether it be our staff or our contract staff. And then we would attempt to make these improvements before we would go and do major capital improvements. One of the things about the Greenfield sewer system I think you should understand is that it is a somewhat old system. It is approaching or passing 50 years of service, and it has certain items which are in good condition and others which need to be replaced. The concrete tanks, there are many in the system, and they are a legacy from when it was originally put together. Typically are in relatively good condition and need to have protective coatings put on them so they can continue to be operated. The new steel tank is in good condition. The old steel tanks that were mentioned, the secondary clarifiers, are in very bad condition and need to be replaced, and we would look to do a plan to do that. The equipment over the top of these tanks is a mix of new and old, and through the next couple of slides I'll talk to what items we would look to improve. As you've seen tonight with many of the photos, in some spots there are patches on patches. This happens with older systems, and they're carried forward, and those patches sometimes create issues for how the system would be operating and could be points of failure, and so to address those is important. And ultimately, within the entire study, there were a lot of worker safety issues that were addressed, identified, and need to be addressed. Similar to the water system, we have a long list of items that need to be corrected. As was mentioned before, some of these things are somewhat straightforward. Eye wash stations, signage, construction of railings on tanks to make sure people don't trip, fall, hit their heads, and drown. Machine guards so that ties don't get pulled into machinery and people are damaged. Grinder disconnects. There at the headworks of the facility, there is a unit that grinds everything up and then passes it through so that those things can float or sink and be dealt with appropriately. There's no disconnect, so the operator has the potential to fall into and become a part of your system, unfortunately. So we'd like to address that. Exterior lighting. At times, the facility needs to be operated in the evening or after hours, and so lighting needs to be ensured that it's adequate so that they can do the things they need to and not have safety issues of falling into tanks. Certain panels and motors were mentioned. High voltage units. There's potential for the operators to have issues, and so we've asked for the contract operator to look at the system and understand what could be done to improve within the panels that we have now and move that forward. Egress from certain buildings. If someone's in there and they can't get through the original opening, the door, they need to be able to go out a different door. Building's on fire, you need to get out. So a second egress needs to be added. The air piping system and the valves in the system. There are pipes that are very old in the system and they need to be repaired, patched. In many cases, they have been. There are still some valves that need to be addressed. And excess air could be found by fixing these leaks, and then it could be applied to other operations. It does not necessarily mean that the blowers that are on site would necessarily run the entire facility. One item, though, was the sludge holding tanks, and at times they are run without air, and when there's a skim layer over the top, you're entombing the odors, but when the air is turned back on, all of that's going to come back out and you're going to smell it. When the tank needs to be evacuated and pumped out on a regular basis, because the sludge is built up, it's reached a certain amount of solids, it's taken off site. Again, you can get odors, and so we would look to understand and address that. Secondary clarifier, it's been mentioned many times tonight. It is those little round tanks. They help to entrap the solids. They float or sink. They are original to the system. They are in very bad condition and need to be replaced. Additionally, there are certain catwalks over the top that you may have noticed in some of the photos along the walls, as well as in the slideshows that show where it would be dangerous for an operator to enter the particular module, and those would need to be replaced. And then air system blower units. One has actually been replaced recently in kind with the same make and model, or a similar one, and we would recommend that the other one be replaced. The totality of these items that would be done in the first 5 years, some sooner than others because they are very important, is $42,100. Capital improvements. There are two segments to your system. One is your collection system. It's been mentioned several times tonight that there's inflow infiltration. That needs to be evaluated so that we can then target those problems and quickly address them so we can reduce the inflow and infiltration coming to the plant. That harms the ability of the plant to treat the sewage coming to it. There's the known sagging pipe section that needs to be repaired, as well as manholes that have already been identified that have leakage and can help to alleviate some of that inflow and infiltration into the plant. Treatment plant improvements. The primary clarifier equipment needs to be replaced or improved. The secondary clarifier needs to be replaced entirely. The air system needs to be replaced. There are certain easements within the system for both the collection system and the wastewater treatment plant that need to be dealt with at a later date. The totality of these items is $1.2 million, and they would be funded through ban and bonds. Typically, the term is tied to the life expectancy of the infrastructure. So if we're talking about a treatment plant component, it would be in the 20 to 30 years. While if we're talking about a collection system using modern piping, it could be in the range of 30, 50, sometimes 80. It depends on the soils, the type of pipe. When the Water Authority does projects, we try to use the best materials so that we can keep that lifespan out there and make it worthwhile and not have to go back and do it again. And so at this point, I'd like to invite Bridget up to address the financials of the system.
So again, we did the same kind of evaluation with the sewer system on what the overall health of the system is. Have the revenues been sufficient to meet the expenses? Is there a fund balance? Is there money in the bank reserved to use to address urgent and short-term items or unanticipated expenses. So starting with your rate, it's a flat rate system. Everybody pays $85 a quarter, $340 a year for each customer. No, we cut and pasted when we made the slides, but that is the rate for Greenfields sewer. That's the Greenfields sewer rate. Sorry about that. So again, we did the same multi-year evaluation. How much money was in the bank available for contingency for known repair or improvement costs each year? What were the expenses? What were the revenues? Where did the system end up with fund balance through the 2015 adopted budget? Let me go back one second. The $340 a year rate, just again as a basis of comparison with that state comptroller number. The state comptroller's average for new systems over the past 3 years in New York State is $706 a year. So just to give you a ballpark of where you are relative to other people with their sewer expenses. There has been a significant increase in the expenses for the system over a couple of years. 2013 was an anomaly because there is an expense here, a $92,000 expense that was a transfer to the town. It was determined in an audit that the sewer district owed the town of Hyde Park general fund $92,000. So the system took a big hit that year that brought down the fund balance along with the cost of significant repairs to the system. So in general, there are increasing trends with expenses, electrical expenses. We always talk about, everybody knows that those are going up. The town has been looking at what it is costing them in terms of their manpower to administer the system, doing the budgeting, the bookkeeping, and so on, and is gradually working with all of the systems to increase that charge to accurately reflect what it costs town personnel to run this system, equipment repair and maintenance. So the end result is that the fund balance is being drawn down to cover these ongoing expenses for the system. And as we talked about with the water system, you want to evaluate that based on what are the urgent and short-term improvements that you know that this system needs to be able to address, as well as keeping some money, it's essentially your rainy day fund should you have an unanticipated expense that you haven't budgeted for. We looked at, again, an apples-to-apples 2015 operating budget under the authority. All told, at the end of the day, we're looking at expenses. Oh, I'm going to go back just one second. There was one other thing we wanted to point out. Based on what the revenues for the system are, it's a flat rate fixed system. So other than the extent to which people are paying penalties and interest if they're paying late, you know what your revenues are going to be. And they're about $95,000 a year, again, based on that flat rate. So there would need to be either a further drawdown on the fund balance or some increase in the rates to generate the dollars to cover what are anticipated for the expenses for 2015 under the town. We looked at, again, expenses under the authority. There are a couple places where we do see the expenses differently. We've budgeted higher for the administrative costs for the system for more aggressive involvement in dealing with these urgent and short-term improvement items. Things like implementing that sludge tank and sand filter operating plan that Darlene was pointed out was needed. We're looking at sludge hauling costs a little differently than the town in terms of historically what those expenses have been. So all told, we would project total expenses about $12,000 higher than what the town projected. And then we're also looking at those improvement items that are needed Jonathan just showed you a slide that showed about $42,000 in expenses of things that we feel need to be done either immediately over the next couple of years. We don't think it's prudent to completely deplete the fund balance to cover those items. Actually, if you end up with $37,000, you don't have enough money in the fund balance to cover all those items. So what we would propose to do is to take about $20,000 out of the fund balance to use towards those expenses. That leaves you about another $22,000 that has to be covered. If you increase the budget by $4,420 each year for 5 years, that generates sufficient revenues that between what you're bringing in from your revenues, what you expect to pay on normal expenses, and what you have available in fund balance to cover those urgent and short-term improvements. At the end of the day, what that would translate into is a flat rate of about $446 a year per household. It's about $54 a year, or about $4.50. We've got different math there. Then the $390 per household that the town would need to raise to meet their budgeted expenses for the system. Capital improvements, again, as Jonathan pointed out, about $1.2 million in improvements that we think should be bonded, and we would take the same approach to those of looking to do an initial short-term borrowing to cover the engineering for those improvements, and then roll that into a long-term bond when you know what your construction costs are going to be, and finance that over a 30-year life of the bond. Again, we do look for funding that's available to help offset these costs. With Greenfields sewer, as well as with Pine Brook sewer, we worked with the town to develop applications for funding through the state's Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund program that provides low-interest loans for wastewater improvements. The engineering evaluation that was done with this grant money was sufficient to meet the requirements that program has to have an engineering report in order to be put on their annual list. So the improvement project for Greenfield as well as for Pine Brook sewer is on the list of eligible projects to be funded in 2015 through the revolving loan fund program. Again, it's a subsidized interest rate program. The extent to which whether the project would actually get the money or not depends at the end of the day. How many projects are eligible, what the cost of those projects are, and how much funding is available through the program. But at this point, you're at least on the list and eligible for that program. So we would continue to work with the town over the next couple months to see if there's opportunities to move that project up the list and increase its likelihood of getting funding. So I think, again, that concludes the presentation. We've talked about what the condition of the facilities are, what kind of improvements it needs. We've put forward for you what the authority would expect in terms of the cost to make those improvements to the system. Just real quick before we go to questions, the process from this point forward, the town is listening to people's comments and feedback on these evaluations, on the proposed transfer of the system. They've done that through the reorganization study committee, the advisory groups, and these meetings. The next step would be for the town to accept these evaluation reports. The town then holds a public hearing, and at that point, which I think we expect to happen in February, the town is then in a position to decide if they want to move forward with each system, an individual decision in transferring them to the authority or maintaining them under town ownership. If the town decides that they want to move forward transferring a system to the authority, the next step in the process is we go to the county legislature. We ask them to create a district at the county level. That process requires us to submit a map plan and report that would look very similar to this. It describes the system, what the customer base is, what the costs of operating that system are, what the cost of any capital improvements are. The legislature then holds a public hearing. Any of you and your neighbors, anybody in the county actually, can go and speak with in front of the legislature, and whether you're for or against that. If the legislature creates the county sewer district, that action is subject to what's called a permissive referendum. What that means is if the necessary number of people sign a formal petition and submit it to the county to request a referendum, then the creation of the county sewer district goes to a public vote. People who live within the district and are registered to vote are eligible to vote in that referendum. It's a simple majority. If 51% say yes, the district is created. We move forward with the transfer. If 51% say no, there is no district, the system doesn't transfer. So if we go to that referendum process and it passes, or if there is no referendum process triggered, then there is a county sewer district, and then the authority and the town work together to deal with the transfer of the assets, the real property, and so on. All together between the hearing before the town's decision, the process with the county legislature, if that process moved forward, we'd be looking at a transfer of the systems roughly in the July 2015 timeframe. So I think that's the process in a nutshell if the town decides to go forward. And again, we would then open it up if anybody has questions, comments. We just ask that you wait till our MC gets there with the microphone.
Two quick questions. So if the property gets transferred, does the town get any compensation for the transfer of the property, or is just?
No, and the reason is that would be a cost to the property owners in the district that we would then pay to the town. The town is essentially the trustee, the steward, if you will, of the money on behalf of the district. So the only thing the town could do with that money is give it back to the district, so you just have a circle of money that would go around. So there, nobody would benefit from that.
Okay, so the second question, can't you guys just manage and not own?
In theory,
current operators haven't been doing their due diligence. So can you guys just manage and not own?
In theory, we are able to do that. We currently do not manage any systems that we don't own. There are concerns that we would have about doing that. The biggest is that in order to be able to finance any improvements to the system, you need to own the infrastructure. We wouldn't want to be in the position of operating a system, managing a system that needed improvements, but not being able ourselves to fund those improvements. And there are ways, could be agreements put in place between the town and the authority to address that. But to be honest, I'm not really sure what the benefit of that approach would be.
I mean, I think if the town, if it stays with the town and we have to borrow money, it's against the town's borrowing capacity versus the county's borrowing capacity, So as a homeowner, what's better for us? If it's easier to get to the funds that we need to operate these facilities to keep our home values, is it better at the county level where they can tap into more money? The town has to deal with property tax increases with caps, and this falls into that, if I'm right.
It does.
So you have other issues behind the scenes that make it difficult. So, I think as all of us, I live in Greenfields too. The one thing we care about is if we ever sell the house, we want to get fair market value for it. And I can't imagine, 5 years, 10 years, if we keep putting Band-Aids on things, what is it going to do to our home values? That's a concern. And, I think I hope the town, listens to that and and keeps that into the forefront for their decision. You know, what's gonna be better for us as the homeowners.
Other questions, comments?
Just 2013. Why did I owe you $92,000?
That was it was through an audit that was realized, and I have a feeling it was because in 2011 we had a issue with our comptroller. If I don't know if people were aware of this, but there was a management problem that existed in town hall where funds were not properly dispersed and nor accounted for, and so when yeah, exactly. So we, you know, okay. Oh, okay. So.
So you see the 92,000? So in 2011, you see the 92,000 and then 41, and then it's down to 17, 19, 19. So it looks like the revenues were inflated in 11 and the beginning of 12, and then found in 13. So it really offsets within there for the most part, it looks like. When I looked at it. I mean, I'm an accountant, but I didn't audit this or anything about it, but it just looks like the revenues were inflated, and then they took it back. But you said it, we never talked about it, but you said 2011, it looks like to me that's the year too.
Okay, yeah, there was, and we are very lucky to have a banker in our group here, because that is exactly what happened. So, I mean, just to recap, you know, certainly what you're thinking right now is, why would I want to see the ownership go from the town to a county? Because basically the town, you can see who we are, we're accountable, but I hope that what you have taken away or will take away from this is the passion that Bridget and Jonathan have for this. So, you know, we're people that we come in, we're elected, and we have certain things that we're working on. And really, water and sewer is not something that your typical person is passionate about. I'm sorry. But these two, especially Jonathan, this man could talk about water and sewer the entire day and not even be bored. So really, what you are, what you would acquire if these are transferred is that type of passion and management. And, you know, I think that that's really the value. And I think what we heard here tonight really is like this dilemma, this balance between what should we spend to keep our system operating optimally, and what should we try to save. And clearly we have that, you know, we have a gentleman here who is really suffering a lot of inconvenience and difficulties because the town, we haven't been putting the money into it. So it's that balance, you know, and you guys need to get bang for your buck. Really, that's what the bottom line is that we have a management tool here that will really, they're excited, they're passionate, and they will make sure that you're going to get the value. Honestly, a town, you know, we have 22,000 people that we're dealing with. The way we acquired this, the town didn't build these. You know, they were built by developers who basically said, we don't want this project anymore. And so then the town ended up taking it. But really, we are not designed for this type of management. You know, it's very complex. These are, you know, very complex systems. I think we all got the details, and there's a lot to it. And so, and I think that, you know, we alluded to how much more regulation there is from the county, and that when you fail those regulations, that hurts you. I mean, fortunately, you're not in some of the other districts that have had you know, the county really come down on them, and that really hurts your property values. So it really is the priority is to keep your property values high by having good services, but not overly not paying overpaying for those services. So I, you know, it's really been my pleasure to work with Jonathan and Bridget and our town engineer and VRI there's a lot going on with these systems, and I feel strongly that they can provide the management that will benefit you, the residents, and really that's all we want, because you're our people. We want you to have good water and sewer, good values of your homes. Help us all. So, okay, with that, I'll just kind of pass this back to Ken if anyone's
With changing transfer of ownership, with using VRI, is there a reason why you're picking them as your controller of the system? Because I've actually, personally, same with this gentleman over here, have not had good results with them.
So it has been our practice when we take over a new water or sewer system that we keep the current contract operator for the transition, because they've got familiarity with the day-to-day, and we want to make sure there's a smooth transition. We go out to bid on a regular cycle. All of our systems, every 3 years, we put the contract operations out to bid to make sure that we know what, across the industry, other companies are charging, what the best value, not always the lowest price, but the best value for the operations is. And right now, the systems either that we inherited or as we've gone out to bid, we have selected VRI right now for all of our systems. That's not always the case. We've used a couple different contract operator firms. But, I will tell you, we've had good experiences with VRI. We've had times that we've had to work through issues with them, and I will tell you that they have been responsive. At some level, it's like anybody that does any work for you. If you're very clear about what you expect, if you follow up, if you don't get what you expect, if you make sure that the work is done in a timely manner, that the billing is appropriate, and you're paying attention, you get good service, and that has been our experience. Pardon? Yeah, there's a lot of reasons that systems get into the conditions that they do. Don't forget from the outset, Aileen had said that all of these systems were built by private developers. We see that throughout the county, and we're talking about things that happened that were built 20, 30, 40 years ago. That systems were built not to an appropriate standard, that corners were cut when the systems were constructed and they weren't even built in the way that they were approved. And then you have a long history in this county of those systems not being well maintained while they were in the hands of the private owner. And when they get to the point that they're deteriorated, that there needs to be time and money put into them, the private water and sewer operators have the ability to literally walk into the town hall, drop off the keys, and say, congratulations, you own a deteriorated water and sewer system. So you have municipalities that start off day one behind the 8 ball with these systems. Aileen talked about, changing administrations. You've got capital improvement projects that can take a 4-year life cycle from the time that you evaluate a problem, develop a design, do the investigations, do the permitting, the approval, put it out to bid, construct it. Trying to get through a 4-year construction schedule, project implementation schedule, where you could potentially have 3 different administrators during that time is challenging. One of the reasons we're in the position that we're in with these systems to be able to have such a full and complete picture is because we were able to work with the town to get that grant money. It's no small thing to be able to come up with $30,000 to do a complete evaluation. And these people literally do crawl through every nook and cranny of these plants to identify what all the issues are. So there's a lot of reasons why they are in the condition that they're in, but I think you also have to listen when the town is telling you that they find this to be complicated, difficult to understand, time-consuming, And I think that's all part of it.
I understand that part.
Yeah,
Well, I'm trying to make it, VRI is operating the system for a couple.
I got it. With VRI, right,
I mean, some things are just obviously all the rust and integration,
Yes.
broken walls. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to say, hey, the wall is broken, it needs to be fixed.
Absolutely.
It doesn't take an independent study to review these things.
so the question is, why does it take an independent study to find out these? Right, no, I get that. So I've been in office for 3 years. Prior to this administration, we had a gentleman called Rich Kane that ran almost all of the water and sewer throughout Hyde Park. He was a one-man operation. And that's why I said in the beginning, thank God we had Pete from Morris Associates, our town engineer, that has been with the town for almost 30 years. It felt like 30. But we basically had a one-man operation that kind of ran all the water and sewer. And he was old school. You know, it was, you know, if there was a hole in the pipe, he got out the duct tape and he duct taped it. If the railing fell in, he's like, I'm not going to fall in. So, you know, he really, you know, he was just old school. Rich actually, he retired actually when we were coming into office, and that's how we got into with VRI. So VRI has only been in that system for 3 years. So they really have been a partner with us since we've been in office. I think Mark will tell you, I've had meetings with him where they haven't been pleasant. When I get yelled at by a resident, I yell at them. You know, when I get phone calls at 12 o'clock at night because there's a water main break and they can't get a hold of somebody, I get that phone call. So, you know, Mark has really responded. We did have some issues, and Mark stepped up and said, hey, listen, I'm going to be your contact, and we need to get these things taken care of. I agree with you. Some of these things that an eye wash, a fire extinguisher, they seem really basic and stupid. It's like, why weren't they there? We had a guy that was there for 30 years, one-man operation that just didn't think he needed it. And then when VRI came in, there was a lot of issues going on, and there was a lot of bills flowing through, and we're like, hey, we need to slow this train down to try to figure out really what's going on. And that's where the supervisor and Emily, the deputy supervisor, went out, got a grant for $175,000, said we really need to get a study on what's going on with these things and figure out how to move them forward. So I'm really excited that we were able to see the true needs of the systems. It wasn't just VRI coming in. VRI can come in and say, hey, we need this, this, and this. Okay, I don't know. You know, I'm not a water sewer guy. Now we really have a true understanding. You know, Pete has always been there, you know, and to be honest with you, I mean, I give Pete a lot of credit for Morris because the report that you have, Pete's been saying that for a long time as well, but it goes back to the changing of the administrations. We don't want to spend 400, 500, 600,000, you know, and then all of a sudden when we see that there's a need, it's another election cycle, that person's out, and so Band-Aids, Band-Aids, Band-Aids. And now we're at the point where we have an old parent, which is your sewer system, and we need to have specialized help, and that's where we have the county. And that's really how I look at that. You know, we have an aging parent that really needs to have specialized help, and we have that now. And really the cost is right in line to where there's not a heavy burden, and we have a plan for the smell. You know, now you can have a face to say, hey, I still have brown water. What's going on, Jonathan? Where today you can yell at me, tomorrow it could be somebody else. We really need, you guys deserve to have an advocate 24/7 that's consistent. You guys deserve that, and I think you'll get that with the county.
Thank you. Pete Sotero. Again, having been with the town for 20 years, there has been, you know, a lot of things that have gone on over the years. Ken mentioned about, you know, the prior operator, and Rich did, you know, a good job. He really cared about, you know, the systems. But the other thing is, and you know, and I can go back to, you know, the 90s when we had meetings with the, you know, advisory groups that were in place, you know, in that time frame. And many of the things that are being brought up here were things that we discussed back in, the 90s, the early 2000s. But at that time, it was always, the Band-Aid approach. We don't want to spend money. We don't want to spend money. And, we get that. So there was a lot of things that were happening. And I think in defense of VRI, they really came in and they brought a higher level of expertise. And they opened up my eyes on things that, I was like, well, nobody ever brought this to our attention before. Why wasn't this brought to our, attention? So I think they've done, a good job. They stepped into a tough spot where, again, we've got aging, facilities, and, they have come in, and I think they brought up much higher level of expertise than we've had in the past. So there's just a whole lot of things that have gone on over the years, and for too many years, it's just been, the Band-Aid approach. And Charles, you brought up an excellent point about once the state instituted the 2% tax cap, any borrowing that the town does, which I don't think is fair, at all, because, infrastructure is one of our most important things. That all counts towards the town's tax cap. So there's a whole multitude of things. And again, as somebody said, the County Water and Wastewater Authority is not subject to the 2% tax cap. And they do watch, the money. We've worked for them. We've done a lot of work for them over the years. They do not come in and just willy-nilly spend their money because we want this, we want, like the Cadillac. Believe me, they're very, very good at understanding that people can only afford so much. What else can we do to try to solve the problem on our own with their own operators? And in the past year that we've all been working together, it's been excellent. We've made a lot of good improvements, and so I'll shut up now. But I just want to get up and say that because there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on over the past 20 years, and I don't like to see VRI get a rap. They've come in, they've really tried to do the best that they can. So.
All right, well, it's almost 9:30. Is there any other questions before we close up? Perfect. Well, I want to thank the residents for being here. I know it's been a long time. Lynn has something here.
I just think that, I know, residents that aren't long-term here, Greenfield has always had water problems. For a long time, the section that you lived in, garden hoses, from what I understand, from house to house in order to bring water back up in that area. That was what was back in the late 70s, early 80s. No, I understand that, but the water problems in Greenfield is not new. It's been there, and it's been deferred maintenance, and now we need professionals to bring it to the level that we have. And hopefully, it's going to cost money, but we have to do it.
My question is, you keep putting money into an antiquated system like that. You keep trying to put Band-Aids on an old antiquated system.
They're not looking to do that.
You're talking $1.7 million or something like that to start, and then we have to come back and maybe do something else, this to water, that to water. You're talking $5 million to hook it up to the municipal
Right.
water, right?
Well,
Over time.
well, I think,
Right.
I think, in your area, I think, right. Right, we're going to have Mark at your house. You'll be there tomorrow, Mark? We'll be at your house tomorrow. I know there's other areas, like we said earlier, that have really cleaned up drastically. I think the more that the flushing is going on, there's something going on, because you're at the bottom of the hill there, so maybe it's flowing down. No, he stopped in September. But, so there's a lot of things going on there. But ultimately, I think we're on a good path here. So it's 9:30. I think we'll wrap this up. And thank you all for coming. And you guys have my number. Mark is here from BRI if you have any other questions. And then we'll proceed from here. So thank you all for coming again. Thank you.